A young black girl brought the courtroom proceedings to a halt when she told the judge she felt hungry. Everyone was taken aback by her actions. As Lara approached the bench, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew tense. The judge, sitting behind a large oak desk, had a stern look on his face. Known as Judge Callisto, he was famous for his strict adherence to the law, no matter who stood before him. Lara, a single mother, found herself in court over $200 in parking fines she struggled to afford. She argued against the hefty penalty. Standing nervously before the judge, he was momentarily distracted by the murmurs of the crowd as they speculated about the outcome. "Order in the court," Judge Callisto commanded, slamming his gavel down. Instantly, the courtroom quieted. Just then, a small, high-pitched voice asked for hamburgers. The voice belonged to Emma, Lara's 6-year-old daughter, who stood beside her. Everyone in the courtroom, including Lara, gasped in shock. Under normal circumstances, Emma's innocent request might have provoked laughter, but not in Judge Callisto's notoriously strict courtroom. Such a childish interruption was both extraordinary and unforgivable. Lara's face flushed deep red with embarrassment. Had her daughter's simple plea just ruined their chances of a favorable outcome? Lara looked anxiously at Emma, who stood innocently with wide eyes. Meanwhile, Judge Callisto, unlike the rest, didn't show anger. His eyebrows lifted in surprise, yet his expression remained calm. Lara quickly knelt down next to Emma, whispering firmly that it wasn't polite to interrupt the judge. They had hoped Emma's presence might soften the judge, but now Lara feared the little girl's outburst might have the opposite effect. Embarrassed, Lara felt they might seem irresponsible because of Emma's interruption. Judge Callisto glanced at Emma, who fidgeted beside her mother. "Did you say hamburgers, young lady?" he asked Emma, his voice unexpectedly gentle, a stark contrast to his usual stern manner in court. The courtroom's attention shifted to Emma, curious about her response and what the judge might do next. Lara held her breath, hoping this wouldn't backfire. Emma, however, remained silent, seemingly oblivious to the stir she had caused. Instead of looking at the judge, her gaze was fixed on a portrait of a stern man in a wig on the courtroom wall. Lara's heart raced at double speed, worried about how things were unfolding. Judge Callisto, however, did not react with anger as Lara had feared. Instead, he shifted his gaze from Emma back to Lara, maintaining a thoughtful silence that made Lara feel intensely scrutinized. After a moment, he directed his attention back to Emma and asked, "Is there something you would like to say, young lady?" Before Lara could intervene, Emma stepped closer to the judge's bench. She nodded enthusiastically and declared, "Yes, sir." She then told the judge that her stomach was growling because of how hungry she was. The prolonged discussion had made it worse, and she and her mother hadn't even had breakfast yet. Lara's embarrassment deepened. Here she was, trying to address a serious legal issue, and her daughter was talking about being hungry in front of a stern judge. The morning had already been hectic. Despite knowing they should have grabbed a bite before court, preparing Emma and ensuring she had everything for the day had taken precedence. Juggling Emma's school needs and navigating rush hour had been exhausting, and now this might make them look even more irresponsible. As Lara began to apologize for the interruption, Judge Callisto stopped her with a gentle gesture. He told Emma that the courtroom could indeed be a long and tedious place, especially on an empty stomach. "Why don't you come up here and tell me more about these hamburgers?" he suggested. The courtroom was surprised by his unexpected interest, and even Judge Callisto seemed to soften slightly. Emma glanced at her mother for approval. Lara, unsure of what to expect, nodded. With a bright smile, Emma skipped up to the judge's desk and stood before the judge's elevated chair, her face a mix of excitement and surprise. Judge Callisto leaned back, watching her come forward. This was not how his court usually operated. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as everyone waited for Judge Callisto's reaction. Concerns flitted through their minds. Was he offended by the interruption? Would he reprimand Emma for speaking out of turn? What unfolded next took everyone, especially Lara, by surprise. Life for Lara was a constant juggle of work, childcare, and trying to make ends meet as a single parent to her lively 6-year-old daughter, Emma. That morning had been particularly challenging. Emma had woken up with a sniffle and a cough, clear signs of an impending cold, adding another layer of urgency to their rushed morning. After ensuring Emma took her medication, Lara had to rush to make it to her job at the bakery on time. Lara began her morning preparations at breakneck speed. She packed a small bag with tissues and mints, bundled Emma up in warm clothes, and didn't forget her daughter's favorite stuffed animal for comfort. Despite her efforts, as they rushed out the door, Lara hoped the traffic would cooperate. Unfortunately, every traffic light seemed to turn red, prolonging their normally brief drive to the pharmacy. Running late, Lara felt the tension rise as she pulled into the pharmacy parking lot, only to find every spot taken, except one reserved for wheelchairs right next to the entrance. With Emma coughing in the back seat and the store appearing empty, Lara wrestled with her decision. Knowing it was wrong but pressed for time, she parked in the reserved space, telling herself, "It will only be for a few minutes." Her quick errand dragged on as the pharmacy queue moved at a snail's pace, turning her few minutes into 15. When Lara finally grabbed the medication and rushed back to her car, the weight of her choice began to sink in. She felt a twinge of guilt as she neared her car and saw the bright orange envelope tucked under the windshield wiper, a $200 fine for her illegal parking decision. The fine was a heavy hit to Lara's tight budget, consuming more than half of her weekly grocery money. Struggling with how to manage the financial hit, Lara spent the next few days going over her finances with a fine-tooth comb. She cut back on everything she could think of, from the gas in her car to her daily coffee. Yet the $200 fine loomed large, an insurmountable burden on her already stretched budget. She was caught between a rock and a hard place. Paying the fine could mean missing her rent, but challenging it in court was a daunting prospect. The thought of facing stern judges and navigating complex legal processes filled her with dread. Despite her fears, the burden of the fine was too great to ignore. With a heavy heart, Lara decided to plead her case in court. She hoped that by explaining her situation in full, the judge might show some leniency. It was a gamble, but one she felt forced to take, clinging to the hope that the judge would see the desperation behind her decision and offer a reprieve. Prior to her court appearance, Lara diligently reviewed parking regulations and rehearsed her explanation for days. As the date approached, her anxiety grew. She wondered if the magistrate would even consider her arguments. Could she possibly convince him to dismiss her citation? Entering the imposing courthouse, with its lofty ceilings and stern security personnel, her self-assurance nearly vanished. The stories of the judge's rigor added to her unease, and the courtroom's solemn air only deepened her apprehension. Standing before Judge Callisto, Lara shook with nerves. She had much to explain. Her narrative was shaky as she recounted the incident. She spoke of her life as a busy, single mother, rushing to pick up medicine for her daughter Emma before work, which led to the unfortunate parking ticket. Lara had practiced her explanation, hoping to convey to the judge the critical circumstances behind her mistake. She spoke clearly and respectfully, aiming to demonstrate her sincerity to the court. Judge Callisto appeared unmoved by Lara's story. His stern face and terse manner made him seem distant. As he listened to her plea, his expression gave nothing away. Lara felt frustrated not only by Judge Callisto's inflexibility, but also by his reputation as a strict adherent to the law. He was known for applying the rules meticulously, without regard for the reasons behind a violation, provided the offense was proven. He was notorious for imposing the maximum penalties and seemed indifferent to the contexts or causes of the violations. Watching the judge sift through her file, Lara's hope dwindled with each passing moment. Despite her robust defense, she sensed his lack of persuasion. He grilled her with pointed questions, focusing solely on the act of parking incorrectly, dismissing the underlying reasons. His impassive demeanor suggested that he might even increase the fine as a rebuke for wasting the court's time. Just as Lara was ready to lose hope, an unexpected event shifted the course of the hearing. Judge Callisto paused, taken aback by a sudden interruption. Until that moment, Emma had been quiet, but suddenly she piped up, innocently requesting hamburgers. Lara had never briefed her daughter on courtroom decorum, and certainly hadn't anticipated such an outburst. Lara apologized, explaining the hectic morning had prevented them from having breakfast. She worried this might reflect poorly on her, painting her as not just a careless driver, but also a neglectful mother. In the courtroom, Emma, sitting next to Judge Callisto, seemed like a small beacon of innocence, eager to escape the somber atmosphere for some food. The judge, softening, leaned towards Emma and gently assured her he only had a few questions, acknowledging her tough morning. His first question was about Lara's job. Encouraged by his kind tone, Emma quickly shared that her mother worked hard, often putting in extra hours at a bakery making cakes and sweets, and even pulling late-night shifts as a waitress in a nearby restaurant. The judge listened, his interest deepening as he continued with gentle inquiries, gaining a fuller picture of Lara's life as a single mother juggling multiple jobs. Emma, only 6, understood her mother's struggles well. She explained how the long hours Lara worked were necessary to sustain them, leaving little time for leisure. In the courtroom, as her daughter relayed Lara's life, a hush fell over the crowd. Initially seen merely as someone who committed a minor parking offense, they now saw her as she really was, a single mother struggling to provide for her family. Emma's recounting of the harrowing events that had led to her mother's current hardships brought a somber mood to all who listened. While Lara had never planned to share these personal struggles, Emma's frankness brought everything to light. Lara was overcome with sadness as she remembered the painful experiences of her past. Being a single parent was more than just juggling her job at a daycare. It was a constant battle with the betrayal that put her in this tough spot. She had started a relationship with Marco, her partner of 4 years, when Emma was only 3. Fresh out of jail on a minor drug charge, Marco had convinced Lara he had left drugs behind and was ready to recommit to their little family. Driven by love and optimism, Lara had placed her trust in him again. At that time, she was setting aside every penny for her college education, hoping for a brighter future for them all. Lara dreamed of moving up in her career, picturing a life where she and Marco could provide a better upbringing for Emma. Encouraged by his promises and his offer to help, she believed in his renewed commitment. Yet that trust shattered one morning when she woke to find her savings depleted and Marco gone. The most painful part for Lara was finding out that Marco hadn't just stolen her savings, but had also run away with her younger sister. Unbeknownst to Lara, Marco had been secretly involved with her sister, who fell for his deceptive promises and betrayed Lara by leaving with him. The revelation shattered Lara. Marco had robbed her of her dreams and left her and her daughter to face the aftermath alone. Lara reported the theft, but the money was never recovered. Lara found herself having to rebuild her life as a single mother. The deep betrayal and the loss of both her sister and partner had crushed her, forcing her to abandon her college dreams. Now burdened by the financial hardship from the stolen money, she had to work multiple low-wage jobs just to make ends meet. This was why a $200 parking fine seemed like an insurmountable burden to her. Everyone in the courtroom listened intently to Emma's retelling of their plight. Judge Callisto, known for his strictness, appeared genuinely affected by Emma's straightforwardness. His questions became more probing as he sought to understand the full extent of Lara's difficulties. As the session progressed, Judge Callisto's demeanor softened, and it became evident through his empathetic gaze. Then, breaking from tradition, he turned to Emma with an unusual question, asking her what she thought the penalty for her mother's parking violation should be. The courtroom held its breath at this novel approach. Lara was shocked, wondering if the judge seriously considered a 6-year-old's view relevant. Emma, on the other hand, was not daunted by the judge's question. She looked at him thoughtfully and suggested that he was the judge and should decide. Her response lightened the mood, sparking laughter throughout the room, a rare sound there. Even Judge Callisto couldn't help but smile, charmed by Emma's sincerity and innocence. Everyone in the courtroom held their breath as Judge Callisto mulled over his decision. After a tense moment, he signaled for a break by raising his hand and whispering instructions to the bailiff, who quickly exited through a side door. The courtroom buzzed with whispers of speculation about the judge's intentions. When the bailiff returned, he was holding a brown paper bag, which the judge took and handed to Emma with a gentle smile. "You're welcome, young lady," he said softly, explaining that they needed to address her hunger before proceeding. Inside the bag were neatly packed juice boxes and sandwiches. Emma's face lit up with a broad smile, and Lara was overwhelmed by the kindness. A rare moment of humanity in such formal surroundings. After the food break, the atmosphere in the courtroom was palpably different. Judge Callisto resumed the session, but this time he reviewed Lara's case with careful consideration rather than rushing to judgment. He discovered that her driving record was spotless and her legal history was without fault. In fact, this parking violation was her only infraction in 9 years. Turning to Lara, he prepared to announce his decision, prompting a collective gasp from the audience as they awaited his unconventional ruling. After reviewing the case details and considering her exemplary past conduct, Judge Callisto decided to dismiss the parking ticket. The courtroom erupted in applause, marking a moment of significant relief. Lara felt an immense weight lift from her shoulders, overwhelmed by the judge's decision. Yet, the judge had more to offer. Continuing, Judge Callisto produced a piece of paper listing local resources for single mothers, including childcare support and career training programs, with several offering free online degrees. Lara was moved to tears by his thoughtfulness, her eyes brimming with gratitude. At a loss for words, she began to stammer a thank you, but Judge Callisto stopped her with a warm smile. To him, this blend of justice and compassion needed no thanks. It was simply the right thing to do. News of Judge Callisto's compassionate act spread across the community, gaining attention on social media and local news. Everyone learned about his special bond with Emma and the surprisingly merciful decision he made in court. The community was surprised by how genuinely the judge cared about Lara's situation. He not only dismissed her ticket, but he also provided resources that helped Lara gain the courage to restart her life. With assistance for childcare and an online degree program, she could ensure Emma's well-being. This support made her feel more secure and hopeful about building a stable future. Through his interactions with Lara and Emma, Judge Callisto experienced a revival of his own long-lost empathy. He began to see the law not just as a set of strict rules, but as a means to protect the most vulnerable in society. It was a heartfelt story, showing that kindness and understanding can find a place even within the solemn confines of a courtroom. What experiences do you have with judges and legal settings? Share your thoughts below and join me in the next video to continue the conversation.